Hello, my name is Taylor Newman, and I'm here today to convince you that it wasn't a completely insane idea for me to try and write a book in 6 months. This year, I'm in ISM 1 under the topic of creative writing. I decided I wanted to do this so that I could write a book incorporating my mother's journals that she wrote while she had breast cancer and my own thoughts and reflections on what came after. A little bit about me: I'm a senior at Frisco High School. I have a dad, a stepmom Courtney, 2 adorable little sisters, my brother Jacob, who's a sophomore here, and my dog, who is not shown because she needed a whole slide to herself. My favorite thing to do is to be in the band. I've been in the band since I was in 6th grade, and I started playing bassoon, but for the marching band I'm in the saxophone section. I love books. I've probably read about 500 books in my life, and I'm only 17. I'll be 18 next week. And writing, I've loved writing since I knew how to write. Even from the 1st grade, I knew that that was something that I wanted to pursue, which is why I decided to pursue writing as my topic this year in ISM. A little bit about my project. The background of my mother's journals, like I said, she wrote them while she was suffering from breast cancer. She did eventually pass away, so I wanted to say why her story, because there are so many similar stories, but the reason that hers is important is because she's already had followers. She had people who knew about her throughout the entire journey, and her whole thing was perspective, and I think that her story can still influence people even though she ended up passing. But why ISM? I could have written this book anywhere else, but I chose to go through ISM because ISM teaches you how to approach professionals, which I will have to do if I want to get this project published. So my research wasn't about necessarily writing, but terms that I came across while I was reading my mother's journals, because the worst thing, in my opinion, that could happen is to end up reading like a medical journal and I lose the audience. So my first research assessment was over chemotherapy versus radiation, which are 2 attempts to get rid of cancer in your body. Chemotherapy being a catch-all with poison going through your veins, quite literally, and radiation being a more specialized section to a portion of your body. My mother's breast and her arm were what she endured for radiation. Taxotere and Xeloda are both cancer medication, Taxotere being an IV medication you receive at a hospital, Xeloda being an oral chemo medication that she took, and metastasis is a definition of cancer spreading from one side of your body to the next, which is actually very common with breast cancer. My second interview assessment is over mammograms, sonograms, and PET scans. All 3 of these are types of tests to detect cancer. Mammograms and sonograms are similar in what they do, but sonograms actually can detect if something is a tumor or a fluid, and PET scans are another catch-all that will catch any cancer in your body. My third research assessment was over biopsies, Synthroid, and steroids. Biopsies being similar to a test in that they detect cancer, but instead of being over your skin, they actually inject a needle into your arm or wherever the cancer is, and they remove a small portion of it to test for cancer. Synthroid is a fake thyroid, and your thyroid controls your hormones, which my mother had issues with outside of her cancer, but still wrote about in her journals. And steroids to control inflammation in her arm. This was usually taken after her radiation, so that was important to know as I'm writing, so I can emphasize that. My fourth assessment was over my UNT trip in October, where I got to experience 2 college-level English classes and a philosophy class. Those were an important experience because it taught me more about what colleges will expect in writing and what my presumable publishing company will assume for editing in college. My 5th assessment was over homeopathic medicine, which in sense is the idea that like cures like. So similar to nowadays when they try and cure allergies by presenting a little bit of something, like if you're allergic to peanuts, they'll give you a small amount of peanuts to help you get rid of this allergy. They would do something similar to that with cancer. However, the reason it is controversial is because medical journals these days in 2015, not 10 years ago in 2005, have finally decided that homeopathic medicine is, and I quote, not appropriate for cancer. This is important because it helps me understand that even though my mother was taking these medicines and she attributes a lot of her victories to homeopathic medicine, the true effect that she was experiencing was something called the placebo effect. And that's important for me to know so that I don't try and explain homeopathic medicine too much, but emphasize that she was basically curing herself by taking these medicines. My interviews were with professionals in the writing field and my mother's friends. I ended up going on 8 interviews, but these are 5. that I went on and wrote assessments over. My first one was with Professor Clay Reynolds at UT Dallas. It was my first interview and I was very nervous, but I actually had a little bit of a right to be, because the first thing that he said to me was, I would not touch this project with a 20-foot pole. And that, instead of hurting me, in fact motivated me, because he went on to say something along the lines of the problems that I was going to account for while I was doing this project. And he was the first person to tell me that he wasn't positive I was going to be able to do this. And instead of being torn down, I actually realized that even though he has written 20 books, he's never written one for himself and about a family member. And that, I think, is something he underestimates me in. So it definitely motivated me a lot throughout the rest of my interviews. My second interview was with a woman named Haley Shapley, who is a freelance writer in the Pacific Northwest. We had a phone call in which we discussed the difference between freelancing and publishing company. And she told me the only reason she decided to do freelancing was because she saw that it had way more freedom and way more money than doing anything in the publishing company. And that was important to realize as I'm going to research writing and if I want to pursue it in college. My third interview was with Kami Wickoff, who's a writer and publisher in Brooklyn, New York. I actually met her while I was babysitting for one of my family friends. And it was not an anticipated interview at all. Like, I'm not exaggerating when I say I was in a t-shirt and shorts. But we ended up talking from the hours of 11:30 p.m. to 1:30 in the morning. And if anyone knows anything about writing and artistic anything, you would know that once you get later into the night, your creative juices get going. So it was an extremely productive interview. I have met with her since, one time face-to-face and 3 more Skype interviews, and I plan to have another one next week in which I will ask her to be my mentor. My fourth interview was with Candace Snyder, who was a physical therapist of my mother and a friend to her. This interview was mostly comparing how I am to my mother, because she has known me since I was in the 1st grade. My fifth interview was with Holly McKay, a friend of my mother, and actually her best friend. And she likes to tell me the stuff that happened behind the scenes that wasn't reported in the journals. And the most prominent one that she told me was when my mother originally found out that she had cancer, and my mother, ran up to Holly McKay, formerly Holly Crandall, and says, "This is not how I choose to die." And knowing that inspired me and made me realize that I'm going to have to talk to her a lot more, regardless of if she's my mentor or not, in order to write this book. Now, finally, I wanted to do progress through pictures. So outside of my ISM work, I've actually had to begin doing my original work. So here's what I've done so far. I had to do over the summer a read through, which basically means that you go through without annotating just to understand what the work is about. One of the great things about this project is that half of it's already written for me, so that's really nice. Also, I ended up putting all the journals in that binder that you can see to your right. It ended up being about that thick and could not be brought today because 2 binders in my backpack would have killed me. The second thing that I did was annotate. This is where I caught all my research terms that I ended up needing to define, which I showed you in my research assessments. And in the picture to the right, those are actually Post-it notes that ended up turning into my outline that in turn helped me decide where my chapters would be. The next thing that I decided to embark on was editing and formatting. If you see on the picture to the top left, the pages of my mother's journals are 296. And that may sound like a big number, but I'm about to make it a little bit bigger. How long does it take me? It takes, on average, 4 minutes to edit each page. Multiply this by 296 pages, and you get 1,184 minutes, or 20 hours spent editing. Keep in mind that this is only editing for syntax and grammar and punctuation, not to mention all the editing I'm going to have to do later on. So this may sound a little daunting to other people, but honestly, I could not have found another reason to spend so much time on a project, because this is something that I truly believe in. Finally, I want to end on my quote. I ended up changing it because I found this as I was reading through my mother's journals, and this is actually something that my dad said in a letter to my mom. And he says, "I have always told you that the aspects of our lives are lined up, and yes, if we look left, there is a very frightening cancer doing its best to beat us down. But if we look right and count the endless blessings that exist, well, the left isn't so scary anymore." The reason that I chose this quote is because it defines looking right, which is what I want to name my project, regardless of if it's published or not. The reason that my mother understood this term, looking right, is because she was all about perspective and faith in what she was going through. And I think that throughout this project, that is something that I can inspire each and every one of you to encounter. Thank you.